So welcome to Wemcast. So welcome guys to Wemcast, another episode with me, Eoin Walker. So I'm here with a colleague and friend of mine, Jennie Sherman. Welcome, Jennie.
Hi, morning.
So what I just wanted to do on this episode with Jennie is really just do a deep dive into mental health and mental well-being, really, both from a clinician perspective and from a community mental health perspective as well. But I think we should probably start with Jennie, with you. Just if you could just give a little bit of background on who you are, what you're about, what you've been studying, and what you do right now.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. So my background originally is in medicine, and I'm still practicing as a clinician, but I've got a real passion and interest in well-being, really. So that's kind of developed over the last 5 to 6 years, and it's taken me off in some really interesting directions. So I'm a qualified yoga teacher, and I also coach. So I coach people one-to-one around various different issues, but at the heart of all that really is well-being and how to improve your well-being in various different domains. And then I'm also totally completing a master's, which is specifically in the use of coaching in well-being, essentially. So looking at how we can actually try and improve people's well-being on both an individual and a kind of community level setting. So yeah, I'm very passionate about ways we can protect and promote our mental and emotional well-being. So yeah, delighted to be here this morning.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic. You are the person to talk to on this subject. You are absolutely. So Jen, so just on that topic, really. I mean, just especially specifically in the current climate, what we're facing at the moment, and around sort of our own mental well-being. What sort of challenges do you see us facing at the moment from a rising tide in demand?
I mean, I think if we're just looking at it from a general community kind of perspective, first of all, I mean, I think obviously it is an incredibly unique time. It's something that it's a period where none of us have experienced what we're experiencing at the moment. So I think the first thing to say is that it's destabilizing for people. It's really destabilizing because in a very short space of time, their world has been turned upside down, externally and internally. Particularly, I think working from home, which is a big factor for people at the moment, and obviously restrictions on being able to go outside. So I think, the kind of big important things are, I think for a lot of people, there is an element of social isolation. I think that is a really, really important factor. And how do I continue to connect with people in creative ways, given the government guidance? I think that is definitely a big, big factor. And then I think there's other factors around things like exercise. Actually, if you're only allowed to really go outside once a day, how do we continue to look after our physical well-being in that type of context? And then I think for some people, there's also just the challenges of maybe, for example, having a family all at home at once, trying to work, trying to look after a family, and all of what goes with that lived environment as well. And we know that our living environment has a massive impact on our mental and emotional well-being, aside from what's going on at the minute. So I think there's environmental kind of factors there too. But I think it's kind of the elephant in the room if you don't talk about it straight off. I think the biggest one is obviously the social media culture that we live in now, and the fact that actually at the best of times it's incredibly difficult to disconnect. And if there was ever a time where we needed to regain control and disconnect and be present, it is now, because I do think that is really heightening everybody's levels of anxiety and also confusion around the situation as well. So I think there's a lot going on, and I think it's a time where actually we all probably need to be actually prioritizing and having greater awareness of real practical strategies, just one or two things you can start to do every day that can really help to bolster your mental and emotional well-being in this type of situation.
Jen, that's fantastic, and I wholeheartedly agree with everything you're saying. I
Mm,
agree that actually find it increasingly difficult to switch off on days off. One of the
yeah,
things I think we all suffer from at the moment is a deficit in sort of focus because of this notification culture. So your iPhone
totally.
notifies you with latest news updates, latest WhatsApp updates. If you're on social media, latest Facebook updates, then latest Instagram updates, latest this, latest that, latest, and it's almost inextricably linked with refocusing. It's a fight for your attention, and it's refocusing your attention on a lot of negative, a lot of confirming or strengthening biases that we're trying to pull ourselves away from. And I think one of the things, like you were just saying, I've had to do, so I've turned my notifications off on my phone for WhatsApp. I'm not on social media anymore. I've consciously de-escalated my life away from the notification culture, so that as you say, the separation and clear lines of engagement between work time and focus time are not. And even in my personal life, I think when I'm trying to focus, I've realized actually making sure that my phone is not going to disturb me has been a powerful tool for being able to get things done. And so I absolutely sort of de-escalating the notification culture to be able to separate mind away from work time and rest time. And is that something you would advocate for some of the clients you work with or people you?
100%. I mean, I would say it's now essential for most people to have some kind of, because the other element of this is what we're talking about here is, you know, we're living currently in a time where many people feel out of control. They feel, because of the external situation, quite out of control. So very simple things like what you're talking about as well. It is a way for you to actively feel like you're taking control of your own well-being. And that in itself can be very alleviating if you are experiencing a lot of anxiety or worry around a particular situation. So this is one example of many different things you can do, which all fit into that category. You know, obviously you're doing it for more than just that reason, but it does have the impact of helping to reduce anxiety. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I'm a massive advocate of, sometimes it can be very difficult for people to go cold turkey with phones, especially if you're constantly switched on. So, you know, I normally start off with, okay, well, if we can't, you know, it's kind of going from hero to zero. Well, can we find somewhere in between to start off with? So can we have a dedicated time at the beginning and at the end of the day where you're allowed to be with your phone? Not unlocked, but you give yourself permission. You give yourself permission to actually have a look at what you want to have a look at. But it's really, really regimented. It's almost like, right, I've got 30 minutes. I'm allowed to switch things on. I'm allowed to check in with my messages. I'm allowed to go onto the news. I'm allowed to go on social media. But after that 30 minutes, that's it. It all gets turned off again. And then I get on with the rest of my day. And I think, you know, that can be actually very achievable for people as well, because it's goal setting as well, isn't it? When it's a behavior, it's changing the behavior for the positive. But it's a goal. It's essentially setting a goal. And, you know, the smaller you make them, the more achievable you are. And then you start to see the benefits of doing it. And then you start to think, actually, do I even need it twice a day? Maybe I could just do it once a day. You know, and I think that's kind of the essence of a lot of this stuff, really. So yeah, absolutely. I think that it is essential, and it's particularly essential at the moment, to have some form of active practice where you take control of how much you're being bombarded by the outside world. And essentially, in many ways, it is an act of mindfulness, you know, which is, you know, it underpins so many of these things, but it essentially is, it's you becoming aware of something that you think might actually be having a negative impact on your well-being, and then choosing to do something about it.
Yeah, Jen, totally. I 100% agree. Yeah. So I absolutely. I think what I've had to do is differentiate the hierarchy of noise in my life and trying to de-escalate the hierarchy of noise and noisy platforms as well. So the differentiate the noise maybe in and around social media versus the noise on WhatsApp and WhatsApp channels, and learning to peel away from that. So you're right, you can be in a space in your mind where you're processing what might have been a very couple of stressful days or collection of days. We're having people now, certainly junior doctors and junior paramedics and nurses that are working a string of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I spoke to a colleague the other day who works in a local hospital, and he's just done 12 shifts on the bounce. And having done 12 shifts, you know, the amount of noise and information and stress in your mind, and to be able to de-escalate that over the process of 3 or 4 days, and just not have other noise in your life, I think is a powerful cognitive reframing tool, to being
100%.
still.
100%. And the way I think this is a very real thing at the moment. I think for healthcare professionals across the board, even healthcare professionals who are also being asked to step up, who've maybe never physiotherapists, allied healthcare professionals, people are being asked to step up and be involved in more of a point of care setting, and who maybe don't also, this is their first experience of this type of situation, or junior paramedics, nurses, doctors. It's what an introduction to healthcare. It's a very intense beginning for them in their career path. So I think you're right, and I think it's multifactorial. And I think the way I always think about this is, the type of environments we work in as clinicians, they are so stimulating, and we are often working from our flight or fight. We're working very rapidly, very responsively, but we're very much in our sympathetic nervous system. We have to be in that place, and what we need to do when we have time off is, simply put, find ways to come out of that, find ways to come back into rest and digest, find ways to just scale it way back down. So as you say, you're turning down the noise mentally and emotionally, but you're also, as you do that, you're starting to kind of relax more in the physical body as well. So, that's bringing in some yoga, obviously some yoga analogies, but it is a very simple way of thinking about it. Is we have a few days off, we need to do something that gets us back down to rest and digest, and that can take the form of lots of different things. So as you say, I think, social media and phones is certainly one element of that, but there are lots of other things that we can do as well.
So just looking at the other things, Jen, just before we pivot and turn and look at maybe some of the mental health in the community, is there any other things you would advocate around, so maybe meditation or maybe yoga, or indeed other aspects of coming back down to baseline, turning the noise down, and refocusing and restoring, really?
Definitely. 100%. I'm a huge advocate of meditation, but I also am quite a realist when it comes to meditation, and I also look at the word meditation in a very creative way. I don't, it's not just sitting down on a pillow and like looking very zen. It can actually take the form of anything can become a meditation. So, people new to meditation who've never done any of it before, I normally say start off with a breathing exercise, because it is actually a form of meditation. And there's actually an awful lot of science and evidence building behind breathing exercises. So it's something, obviously as healthcare professionals, we're so used to evidence-based behind things. And I think it is true though. Breathing exercises have got a growing evidence base, and often it's used a lot in therapeutic contexts with various different types of therapy, such as compassion focused and lots of different other types. So I would actually say to people, start with something very simple like a breathing exercise, and going back to your goal setting, keep it really, really simple. You don't have to be a hero. Literally 3 minutes. Start off with 3 minutes a day. See how it goes. See how it goes, and then you can start to adapt it, change it, increase it, etc., etc. But I normally do recommend breathing exercises as an entry point for people, just to see how they get on, because it is quite accessible. There are lots of different tools online to help with that. Loads of different free resources. So, for example, Insight Timer, it's an app you can get. Free. It's got a huge number of meditation resources, so it's also great to just have a look, because you can just plug in and listen to somebody for 10 minutes, and it's brilliant. But there's also loads of breathing exercises in that. There's some fantastic websites out there as well. A really good one called 10% Happier, which is really worth checking out. So it's brilliant. Every day they've got a different meditation teacher in. They're discussing the current situation, challenges that are coming up as a result of it, how we can help on our mental health, and then they have a meditation. So things like that can be really good. It's just kind of like, sparking your curiosity, and also then getting you to start practicing as well.
Fantastic, Jen. That's absolutely fantastic. So
Yeah.
just pivoting slightly, Jen, and looking at so you like you said, the holistic approach. So just looking at some mindfulness, absolutely, meditation, just coming back to
Mm,
stillness really, and resetting those baselines on days
mm,
off, letting days off be days off. But around sort of some of the other, because it's actually in this current climate at the moment where the government's advocating, a lack of community, face-to-face community, which actually can be quite
mm,
hard on us as clinicians,
mm,
not interacting, because I think we
mm,
are community-seeking individuals, actually, fundamentally community-seeking individuals. How would you
definitely.
advocate sort of tackling that, either using modes of technology, or indeed from just getting more restoration and balance with nutrition and sleep? What are some of the other external components of good mental health we can facilitate in the current climate?
Yeah, so I think that I think you're absolutely right. As much as this is the kind of the balance we're talking about, isn't it? We're trying to disconnect from those things that we are making an assessment of that are actually kind of very stimulating versus actually really positive, important connection that is so inherently needed because human beings have such a need for that. So we need that. We really need that. And I think this is a time where it's about creative, it's about thinking creatively about ways to sustain that. So, for example, I am a massive fan of a FaceTime coffee with a friend. So you can't meet them for coffee, have a FaceTime coffee, have a FaceTime drink. I can't go to the pub. Let's have a FaceTime drink. If there's a group of you, let's have a FaceTime pub quiz. Like, technology platforms are amazing. And actually, yeah, it's not the same as physically being with somebody, but it's still, you get all of those positive emotions and you get that, that sense of connection and community. And I think it is so important to try and keep those types of things up, but we have to think creatively, don't we? So, I think things like that, just from a very social perspective, are really important. But getting into the exercise side of things, I actually think this has been really this is a really great time to try new types of exercise because actually there are an awful lot of, for example, my background is yoga, but I love all types of exercise. But there are an awful lot of websites at the minute who've had to close doors, but have put everything online, and as a result of that, they've massively reduced their prices. So they're trying to get people involved in online exercise, but it's not at the normal price that you'd have to pay if you went to the studio to do something. So it's actually a great opportunity to try out new types of exercise from home. And you can do that with a friend as well, just like you maybe get a friend to go to an exercise class. You can be like, do you want to join me on Zoom and we'll try this new, like a Zumba class? So I think, it's kind of just about changing our frame of mind, isn't it? We're all going to be virtually doing things with each other, but the thing to say is it is still possible. And that is amazing. It is really, really amazing. So, yeah, I mean, but obviously we've kind of naturally moved into talking about exercise. And I think, I always talk about with all my clients and coaching and just generally personally myself, it's something I just really think: exercise, nutrition, sleep. These three biggies are like, they are your foundation generally, but in times like this, they almost become even more important.
I would wholeheartedly agree with you there, Jen, and like you say, covering all bases as well, and
Yeah,
getting a minimum of 7 to 8 hours sleep a night
yeah,
of good sleep. Like you said, actually being quite strict about when you do and don't look at your phone, but from a sleep perspective, not having bright lights in your eyes just prior to sleeping, just making sure you can facilitate your circadian rhythm as much as possible, into a
right.
healthy balance. And so getting that kind of healthy sleep, getting a healthy pattern of exercise, and getting a healthy mix of community, albeit online, all
Mm,
sounds really, just a really nice balance, actually, for coming back down to baseline. And
mm,
as you said before, you said it earlier, whereas you're
mm,
having a little bit of time on your own every day in the morning, just to meditate, just to quieten yourself, return to your breath,
mm,
start to realize that the micro stimulations, just and also just something I love, we were saying with a colleague about cognitive diffusion. So actually coming back to your mind and realizing that actually your thoughts might be like the weather in the sky. Your mind is the sky, and your thoughts are maybe the clouds and or the weather, but it doesn't define you as a person, which is meaning you're not being hijacked by your thoughts. You aren't how you feel. A big misconception is people think their feelings equate who they are as a person, but actually we're so much bigger than how we feel. Being able to transcend the waves of emotion and thought life, because it will pass. As I was chatting with another guy for Wemcast the other day, and he said there's never been a double night. There's always been, it's night, day. And actually there's, however bad things get, either from your thought life or otherwise, we can transcend that. And the process of cognitive diffusion is diffusing the power of thoughts and or emotions for better or worse, and to come back to baseline, and just to know that actually it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay.
Definitely.
I'm going to be okay. It's all going to be okay. But having that time in the morning to come back to the breath, realign and reset. Even actually before a work day, I generally get up. I'd be interested to see what you do for a work-life pattern, but I generally get up about 45 minutes to an hour earlier than I need to leave. And I have a 15-minute window where I just sit with a coffee and just come back to myself, realign my perspectives for the day. Put my thought life aside and just return to a very sort of quietened state, just to bring myself into the day, and just to reset myself. Is that something you do, or is it something you would advocate?
Very much so. I mean, I'm a huge advocate of both a morning and a nighttime regime, because I think in the morning there's a lot of you can set a very strong intention in the morning, can't you? Normally for me after I've had a coffee, but I think you really can. It's a really lovely time of the day, particularly if it's quite quiet in the house. You can just sit and you can just be with that. So I'm very, very similar. I actually love to get outside in the morning and just like be outside, get fresh air. And then I love to just sit with that and just almost just try and get to quite a calm and grounded place. So for me, that normally always starts off with my breath. I think that's the conduit that gets you out of the busy mind, and all of what you've just talked about, all of those things they're part of the human experience. We are all going through them. We're all having them, and we're all in the same boat. But actually, it's about trying to find those things that take you just away from that, back into where you are with that coffee cup, sitting outside and just trying to relax. But similarly, at the end of the day, I mean, almost arguably, I think with healthcare professionals as well, at the end of the day, it's needed too. Because I think particularly at the minute, it is going to be a really charged time for people, emotionally, I think particularly. I think, for sure. And I think that it's about also having something at the end of the day. It's that golden hour before bed I talk about as well. There's a golden hour before bed where you should be switching off and you should be trying to wind yourself way back down. And I'm always drawn to the word compassion. I mean, it's a big part of what we do in our work, but rarely do we turn it in the other way. And there's a huge body of work around self-compassion in healthcare professionals. And I think that now is a time where we as a group of people really need that. We need to acknowledge the difficulty of what it is we're trying to do every single day. And we need to give ourselves a break, actually, and say we are doing the best we can given the current circumstances. And it's just about nurturing that way of kind of relating to yourself as well, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, Jen. I think that completely makes sense to me. So Jen, just sort of pivoting slightly and looking at mental health within the community, because I think as all this goes on, in the current climate, I think there's as me and you have both talked before, the amount of mental health which is in the community, and a lot of physical health starts with, I think, with mental health, for better or worse, and actually bleeds over into physical health. But I know there's a melting pot out there of mental health. And just something you said prior to now, it was actually last time we talked a while ago, and something you were teaching on, which I really found insightful, was just looking at the differentiation of a few of the pathologies, which this really made sense to me actually when you said it, and it was around just the difference between neurosis, psychosis, and the dementias, just the sort of classification of mental health, and just around sort of just in neuroses, such as depression, anxiety, and mania, and obsessions and compulsions. Patients usually maintain insight. So the differentiation is they maintain the insight, whereas the psychoses, the schizophrenias or the pure psychosis states, patients generally lack insight, and they're disorientated and deluded. And then dementias, again, they can lack contemporary insight into the cognitive pathways and neural pathways. But what really helped me there was, Jenna, and it really relates to the current climate, I think, is that actually, so neuroses, they maintain insight, and it actually, so they might actually, the stresses and strains of day-to-day life will, and I'll see this as a paramedic, you'll probably see it as a doctor in the ED, is they'll be fully cognizant of everything that's going on around them, but really on this roller coaster of emotion, of hormonal changes, of complete stresses, really, intrinsic and extrinsic. But the psychosis states, so the schizophrenic states, really lack insight. And I found that really helpful as a tool for differentiation for undiagnosed mental health. So actually, me going to a patient first and foremost that lacks insight and that might be showing the first signs of a sort of schizophrenic state. But actually, there's a lot of external stresses, social isolation, there's social distancing, lack of sort of tactile and or communication. There might be a real lack of self-care. And all these things have bled over into this lack of insight, and that actually tips the patient into quite a delusional state, and or a neurotic state. So the neurosis or the kind of manic state where they maintain insight, and what they do is they're either sort of hyperstimulated or hypostimulated into a place of deep distress. And I'm not too sure, and I'd be like to hear your side of things as to whether whether it's de-escalating either state, or indeed communicating with either state is easier and or preferable, really, because I'm not too sure maintaining insight into a deeply distressing state is any more comfortable than a lack of insight into these states. But I don't know, it really resonated with me when you said that. And are you seeing that in ED? Are you seeing that in practice or indeed on the ground?
I mean, I think there's some really, I would encourage anybody who's interested in mental health generally. There is some really interesting information on the Royal College of Psychiatrists website, where they've obviously, given the situation, they've had to plan for the predicted impact that coronavirus will have on the mental health population on lots of levels, from an operational level, but just even from the sheer perspective of, for example, people with addictions who are normally on addiction programs and are getting replacement drugs from a pharmacy, but are being told to socially isolate, and access to those medications that they really need, they may not be able to get them. That increases the likelihood that they could start to use street-based substances. And obviously that's just not what we want, because those people, are then therefore more likely to present in distress and in a place of higher need. So I think that's just one example, obviously, but I think that the impact of the situation on people in some of these more vulnerable groups is very, very, very real. And I mean, I'm really drawn in particular to, anybody who has got a diagnosis of anxiety or an anxiety related condition, depression and OCD. I mean, if we think about those three, it's hard enough if you are somebody who's already experienced an awful lot of anxiety to have this new thing come along. And I think similarly with depression, the social isolation obviously is really, really not good. And with the OCD, I mean, such a big part of the campaign at the minute is around hand washing. And that for somebody who maybe struggles with obsessive based behaviours to do with hygiene, that is really triggering. I mean, genuinely so triggering. And I would encourage anybody who is dealing with patients in these types of situations to look at the Royal College of Psychiatrists guidance and also look at Mind. Mind have an excellent section on coronavirus and mental health, and also the Mental Health Foundation and also the Mental Health First Aid for England. So they are fantastic resources to just read about. But on a very practical level, like getting back to what you're talking about, if you're actually assessing somebody who is very distressed or very anxious, I mean, I think ultimately it's a very similar thing, isn't it? What we are trying to do is obviously get that person to relax a little bit. And sometimes that takes the form of distraction. It does. And sometimes that takes the form of actually trying to promote relaxation-based techniques. So I'm thinking more of the anxiety that could be associated with having anxiety, an underlying anxiety-based condition, or the anxiety that could come from something like OCD and the current situation. So so that they're quite kind of distinct to those two categories. Is trying to relax, trying to distract, trying to do something that gets you away from just focusing on that one thing. And then I guess as a whole of the group, anxiety, depression, OCD, if we put them as a group, I think connection is so important for anybody with a mental health condition. And I think that maintaining connection, so having safe people to talk to if your level of distress is starting to increase, I think is essential. So whether that takes the form of obviously key workers, community teams, therapists that you have, which hopefully you've been able to switch to an online platform, family, friends, and support groups. I mean, that is the other thing to say, is that there are really good support groups out there, and of which many will already be part of. But this is a time where people really do need those types of frameworks to support them. So, I think disconnection and isolation in those types of situations is so distressing. And obviously, what we don't want is for people to end up in real crisis, which I think is such a real possibility given what's going on at the minute. So, yeah, I think it's really important considerations, definitely.
Absolutely, and just pushing it on something you said there, Jen, around addiction actually, and just having the social networks or not in this time with people with really prevalent addictions, maybe long lasting or medium term lasting. It's really difficult. It must. And how do you see it from your perspective of sort of being able to sort of de-escalate an addiction when you're being asked to socially isolate, and or you can't necessarily seek the help from physically face-to-face consultation? In your mind, are there other ways which people can sort of break the habitual cycles of addiction that might be holding them?
I mean, I think this is something that's probably actually really relevant to just the general population, isn't it? Because I mean, really interesting. But in Ireland, for example, they've deemed the off licenses as an essential business, so they're not closing. Now, I'm saying that as a joke, but it is very interesting because I think that there is a real chance here that what we're going to see is people drinking more. So people at home more who are going to drink more alcohol, whether it's socially or whatever. People who smoke are maybe at home, they're more bored, they're going to smoke more. There are real kind of the reality of the situation we're in can absolutely certainly provoke a kind of worsening of some of those underlying behaviours. So, I mean, I think a lot of that is obviously first and foremost education. So people are aware that actually, the impact that this situation could have on those types of behaviours. And then I think it's us as a group of healthcare professionals also being aware of that whenever we're actually seeing people. I think this is particularly relevant in the community. So, when people are seeing people in a community-based setting. So, but it's relevant to us all, isn't it? You're at home, things have changed an awful lot in terms of your normal lifestyle, it's very easy to slip into repetitive patterns that aren't good for you. I know obviously it's not necessarily a classification of an addiction, but it's a habit that's starting to become detrimental to your well-being. So I think I always say the first thing with that is an awareness. So it's an awareness of what you're doing, and an awareness of whether it's good for you. So, the question I really like, the self question I really like is, what do I need? And is this going to be helpful, or is this going to be harmful? Those series of three questions, are actually really, they can be really helpful for most of us when we are, in these types of situations.
Yeah, absolutely, Jen. And just to agree with something you said last time I saw you again, which is around looking at addiction and fundamentally who have you got in your life? Because the five key people in your life, as in the five closest people in your life, will have influence on you whether you choose to acknowledge it or not.
Definitely.
So are those five people wholesome? Are they bringing
Definitely.
you, are they bringing you more closely aligned to who you want to be rather than who you'd rather not be? And are they inducing good habits over negative ones? And me and you both said, I remember last time, being judicial about who you have as close community in your life, because whether you choose to acknowledge it or not, they will have relevance and bear influence on your life just by the simple process of spending time with you. And I think people fall into that trap of maybe sometimes not being aware of how powerful other external influences of those five key people are to you. And that's one of the things I would always counsel people is be very judicial and very purposeful about who you position in your life, because they will have influence on you. It has to be a purposeful act.
Definitely, 100%. And I think you're absolutely right. And I think that can feel initially very, very uncomfortable for some people, is to start thinking about their interactions like that, and start to evaluate them on that type of level. But it is essential because it is essential because it has such a big impact on your mental and emotional well-being. It's massive. It's such a huge impact. And I mean, it links very much to the whole idea of boundaries and the whole idea of being very clear of around who's helpful, who's supportive, who's a positive, constructive influence, and actually who at that time. It goes back to the question: what do I need? Who do I need to speak to? Who now can I know I can go to, and it's safe. There's something there that is so, it's so nourishing for me, because this is ultimately what we're talking about, particularly as healthcare professionals, is who's going to nourish me, who's going to nourish and nurture me when I myself am actually, going through an incredibly stressful and unprecedented time.
Absolutely, Jen, 100%. And what I find is that in a time of deficit, after 6 12-hour shifts, I actually need to be around people that don't then draw from me more of a deficit, rather give to me, even if it's just in simple little ways of humor, of perspective, of a smile, of a joke, or indeed of just some lightheartedness. But just give back to me rather than take from it. I'm already overdrawn in the whole baseline of energy. So you almost want people that can deposit and impart, just even if it's a little bit of energy and or positivity into your life. And I think we both talked about positioning positivity in our life in little pockets, so that you can just operate in the world. Because I think day to day, as you were saying before, most of our work life it takes from us. It's a deficit in our life rather than giving back to us. So that we do need people and habits in our life that then give back to us. But you've managed to orchestrate a balance between the yoga, the medicine, and the mentoring. Does the yoga and the mentoring give back to you?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, 100%. I mean, I would. I mean, it's been around for a while. The whole idea of compassion fatigue. It has been around for a while, hasn't it? This whole kind of idea that when you're working in a compassion orientated field, people are always expecting something of you. You are there to provide that that calm perspective, that wisdom when others are actually normally very distressed, aren't they? So I think that if we look at it from that, or simply put, we look at it as two buckets, very simple in my analogy, and you've kind of got, or one bucket, and you've kind of got things that fill you up, and then if you imagine you've got holes where the water's being let out, it's about trying to kind of minimize where the holes are and then fill it up whenever you can. So at least you're always you're never getting down to under 50%. You know what I mean? Because that's when we start to fall into these kind of patterns of, habits that aren't very helpful. We're much more prone to negativity because we're just tired, because the physical body and the mental body, the mind and the body, are not two separate things. They are completely the same thing. They are so interrelated. So if you're tired, you're going to be more negative. You're going to feel more negative about things. For example, so this is kind of a very holistic way of thinking about it. So absolutely. So for me, those things are essential. So, yoga is an essential filler upper. Exercise is an essential filler upper. Nutrition, being so mindful and so disciplined about eating properly, particularly at work, actually, where I think it can be really difficult. That's something I've learned through being a doctor for a while, is that you have to do these things. These things, you can't just expect them to happen. You must continue to look after yourself on those types of levels. And nutrition is a huge component of that. And it's one that maybe we don't talk about quite enough, but actually it's essential. So they really do. And then for me, mentoring and coaching, that's something that very much fills my bucket. So it's very aligned with kind of my strengths, my values. So that actually really adds to that bucket, essentially. So I sometimes do that with people. I kind of think, if you think about your well-being as being limited in many ways, your capacity is limited. It's not endless. You need to be adding things in that are bolstering that all the time. And it's not about one thing, it's about lots of different things. And it's about having lots of different tools in your toolbox that you can draw on, depending upon the situation and depending upon that question. What do I need? What's going to be helpful? What's going to be harmful?
Jen, I completely agree. I absolutely completely agree. And just at risk of going off tangent slightly, but I actually think just stepping outside of medicine and this is why it can be so refreshing. And that's really why from a expedition mindset, getting other strings to your bow, doing other things that bring you alive, because expedition work can be, you can be resourceful. It can involve exercise, can involve beauty, can involve being in the great outdoors, but it also aligns you with other things, because even on expedition you are a mentor to younger people as the expedition paramedic, doctor or nurse. But you're right, the bigger mandate is finding things maybe outside medicine that serve you and come back and bring you life and actually fill that bucket, because like you said, that you've got a finite amount of compassion and or energy, and learning how to navigate that whilst having other strings to your bow is, I think allows you to bring your best out at work as well. And so just really quickly, how did you, because I'm massively interested in this, Jen, because I actually aspire to be like you in a lot of ways, just having more strings to my bow that bring me to life and that actually align with my overall mandate, which is having restorative conversations, making sure that I'm practicing good physical and mental health as well as the people I'm treating. How did you find mentoring, and how did you find yoga? Was it just a process of trying lots of different things and you just thought, actually this is exactly on point for me?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was probably quite organic. It's a really good question, actually. A really, really good question. I think is a right. Yeah. So I think it was kind of organic and iterative, like many things often are. But I think and I think that this is quite a common theme for people who maybe are in a profession and then make a decision to actually diversify a little bit, or to diversify. That's probably the correct word. Is sometimes it's based on an ongoing reflection of the current situation you're in, and a recognition that actually it's not sustainable, and actually it's actually becoming the balance is starting to tip too far in one direction, where actually it's starting to feel like you don't have very much left in the tank, if that makes sense. And I think for me, there very much was an ongoing recognition of that. I was very much kind of doing a lot of questioning, not using a big word, but existentially probably as well, around actually where do I want, what sources of meaning do I need in my life? Where can I derive meaning? Because actually it can't all come from work. That is blue sky thinking. It really, really is. So I think there was a lot of that went on, an awful lot of reflection and introspection, and then actually it was also, I think it's just being very practical about it. In order to actually start to explore other things, you need time. And that is very, very difficult to do if you're a full-time trainee in any healthcare profession, not just medicine, anything. It's an intense program. So I think there is an element, being very practical around how to create time to do these things. And I made a few decisions to free up time, because I felt at that time it was so important to me. And then I guess the process of how that unfolded was very organic. It was a sense of, I had intuitions though. I kind of had, I knew I wanted to get involved in the expedition world, because that brought together so many things that I thought were fantastic. So that led me down that road, and that's been amazing. And then, the yoga was very much, I was like, oh, I got very into meditation. And then I thought, I've never tried yoga. And I love physical activity. What would this be like? And it was allowing myself to be curious, and then actually to just allow that curiosity to unfold and to just try new things. And I think that is something that I'm such an advocate of, like, try new things. And it's not about being good at it. And I think that's something that in healthcare sometimes we think we have to be really good at everything we try. But this is not what this is about. This is about finding things that actually you just really, really love. You're just naturally, they're like passions to you. They're so interesting. They just fill you up. And to do that, and then to allow yourself to do that, it is quite an organic process. You have to just really be curious and keep trying. And actually, and obviously, that I'm saying that because I did have the beauty of time, and I'd found a way to continue in medicine financially to enable me to do this. But we are very lucky that we can do that, and many healthcare professionals can do that. There are ways for us to continue in the profession and keep up those professional responsibilities that we do care about, but actually also start to invest in ourselves on a deeper level, which in the long run is only ever going to make you better at everything anyway. So yeah, I think that kind of like answered your question in a long-winded way, but it was it was, and it was also through a lot of, I do this a lot when I'm coaching people as well, is sometimes also to help us move forward, we have to go back. And sometimes actually going back a bit and going back to things you were really into when you were younger, all those things that you were maybe really interested in that you just forgot about because life took over, and starting to think, well, actually, how would that show up now? How would creativity show up for me now? Well, maybe I should give something a go.
Yeah. Jen, that's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic,
Yeah.
and quite practical as well. And it's something I think we'll speak to a lot of people. So Jen, just coming into land really on the conversation, just wanted to maybe get your thoughts and perspectives for the community of sort of WEM followers that might be listening or watching this this podcast. Just if you could speak to the community, any of your thoughts, or indeed encouragements around sort of how to survive and or thrive in the current climate. Just from some take-home messages. Is there anything you'd just like to say as we finish off?
Yeah, I mean, I think the overarching thing to say is give yourself some compassion first and foremost. Honestly, give yourself some compassion. I'd really encourage people to look at the work, the self-compassion work. It's incredibly relevant for the moment. So that's the first thing to say. Second thing to say is be precious about time off. Absolutely precious. Think about it in that way. You're really stimulated at work. How can we just rest and digest? What do I need? Can I look after myself best with these 24 hours that I have off before I go back in tomorrow? Literally make that the first question you ask yourself when you wake up in the morning. So just really draw your focus back into that, because I think that's what this is about, isn't it? It's about trying to hone it back in to say my well-being first on my days off, because I need that. I need to fill my tank up. So I think that, and I think the third thing, and I always say this, is do not be afraid to talk to somebody. And actually, if you're really struggling, get help. 100% get help. And I say that to healthcare professionals, to WEM followers. It, that is not a weakness, that is essential. And I think that we are going to see off the back of what's happening at the minute, that is going to start to become more of a headline in our professions. And I hope it does, is that actually we all need support, and that includes all of us. So I would just, yeah, definitely say that to everybody. Yeah.
Listen, Jen, that's powerful. That's absolutely powerful. And I think that those three fundamentals are absolutely powerful, because they all circle around self-care. And I think in a time, like you said, of deficit and of continual demand and draining, that self-care is key to sort of being able to continually give yourself at work. So I think that's absolutely precious. But Jen, listen, thank you so much for your perspectives today, and just your time, your effort, and your thoughts, because they're truly valuable, not only to me, but to, I think, everyone that's listening to this.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, no, a joy to be here this morning. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're a legend. You're a legend.